So there I was learning about these problems. But I was also learning about the problems faced by so many of the people living in and around chimpanzee habitat. The terrible poverty of so many of them, the lack of good health and education facilities, and the degradation of the land as human populations grew. And it came to a head when I flew over the tiny Gombe National Park. It's only 35 square kilometers. And when I began in 1960, it was part of a forest belt that stretched right across equatorial Africa, rather like the forest belt that used to stretch more or less unbroken right down the length of Malaysia. And when I flew over in 1990, Gombe was a tiny island of forest surrounded by completely bare hills, more people living there than the land could support, too poor to buy food from elsewhere. The steep slopes were being deforested as people tried desperately to get farmland to grow food, farmland overused and infertile, as the trees were cut down from the steep slopes, and Gombe is a series of valleys along the edge of Lake Tanganyika, so there was dreadful soil erosion, and the silt was clogging up the little streams running down to the lake. So it hit me then, if we don't do something to find alternative ways for these people to live without destroying the environment, we can't even hope to save the chimpanzees. And that's when the Goodall Institute in Tanzania began its program of Take Care or Tukari. And it was different from any other community-based conservation, which was just vaguely beginning at that time. It's all the rage now, but it wasn't then. But we picked a very small team of local Tanzanians. They didn't even have PhDs. They worked in NGOs in forestry, agriculture, and so on. And they went into the 12 villages around Gombe and asked the people, what can we do to make your lives better? And we started, as they wished, restoring fertility to the overused farmland without chemicals, I may say, and better health and education. That was working with the local Tanzanian authorities, who should have been doing it anyway, but were not. And then, as the people came to trust us, we introduced what I think has been the best intervention, which is microcredit, based on Muhammad Yunus's Grameen Bank. And this meant that groups of women and a few men joined in, could go and take out tiny loans to start some environmentally sustainable project, like buying a few chickens so they could sell the eggs, like starting a tree nursery for the gradual reforestation of the bare hills. And almost all who borrowed have paid back. It's quite amazing. And if you do this rather than hand something out, once they've paid back, they're proud. It's theirs. They own it. They worked for it. And they can then take out another loan if they wish. So that has been tremendously helpful. We also got as many scholarships as we could to keep girls in school during and after puberty. It's been shown all around the world that as women's education improves, family size tends to drop. And family size is one of the biggest problems that they face in Africa. And we also provided family planning information delivered by local people who'd been to workshops. And as we also improved the clinics, the mothers were eager to get this information because now they knew if their baby got sick, it was likely to be cured and to live. So all really, really successful. And then we introduced GIS, GPS satellite imagery, helped the villagers to plan out the use of their land. And because by now they trusted us, they agreed to put aside land around the tiny Gombe National Park for regeneration and to allow the hillsides to regenerate from the magical seeds left in the ground that had given a chance to grow again into trees. And so this program the reason I say it's so successful, we taught people from the villages around Gombe, not just the 12, but further and further out, to use smartphones. They could go into the forest and they could actually record the health of the forest. Illegally cut tree, animal trap, sighting of a chimp, sighting of a leopard, that sort of thing. Very proud of that. And then they could upload it when they got to a place where that was possible, to a platform in the clouds, Global Forest Watch. This program has now spread through 104 villages throughout the Tanzanian chimp range. There's not many chimps left in Tanzania, 2,000 at the most, and almost all of them are not in protected parks, but out in village forest reserves with no protection at all. So now, because the villagers have understood that protecting the environment is for their own future and not just to protect wildlife, they have become our partners in conservation, and they now have the tools to do it themselves. And this program is now in 6 other African countries. And I can definitely state there are chimpanzees alive today, there are forests that are flourishing today because of this program. It's been super successful. And we're still, of course, carrying on with it. By this time, I was spending more and more and more time traveling around the world, talking about the problems of Africa, the problems of wildlife. I was learning more about the problems faced by animals and people in these different countries around the world. I know, just from being told, some of the problems faced by the forests and animals in Malaysia. And fortunately, more and more people are beginning to understand the importance of forests, the importance of protecting them, and the importance of trying to restore them. Well, as I was traveling around, I was learning about what we're doing to the planet. I mean, it's the pollution, terrible pollution. I've just come from Beijing, and the pollution there was so bad on one day that you really didn't want to go outside. And the pollution, I know, in India, in some cities, has been so bad, the government's had to hand out thousands of masks for children because it's not safe for them to breathe the air. And we've polluted not only the air, but the land. Think how we grow crops with industrial farming. Can you think of anything more stupid than growing our food by putting chemical poisons on the land? We're poisoning the soil with its rich importance, but we're also poisoning our own food. And there's a proliferation of diseases which many people put down to the pesticides and herbicides and fertilizers that are spread on our farmland. And all of this is washed down into the rivers and washed down into the sea. We're polluting the ocean. The ocean is one of the great lungs of the world. It can absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and it can give out oxygen. Even more important is the forests. The forests are the other great lung of the world. They give us clean air and clean water. They provide us with some spiritual strength that we don't have when they're gone. And I'm afraid that oil palm plantations don't do the same thing. So we're harming this planet in so many different ways. We're recklessly burning fossil fuel. It's adding to these so-called greenhouse gases, which are circling the globe like a blanket, trapping the heat of the sun. Is climate change real? I've been in Greenland. I've seen the water pouring out of the ice cliff, and with the elders, the Inuit elders I was with said, even in the height of summer, the ice never used to melt here. And this was late winter, and the water was pouring down, and the icebergs were cracking off, and the ice was floating down into the ocean. And I've been with people who've had to leave their island homes because the water has risen, not only because of melting ice, as the glaciers melt on the mountains as well, but because as the water heats up, it expands. I've been everywhere. I mean, everywhere I go, people say, well, the weather patterns are changing. The bad hurricanes and typhoons are getting worse and more frequent. The droughts are getting worse, more unpredictable. And the flooding also is getting worse and more unpredictable. Isn't it peculiar? The biggest difference between us, chimpanzees, and all other animals is this explosive development of our intellect. We now know that many animals are way, way, way more intelligent than we ever used to think. I mean, chimpanzees and orangutans and gorillas can be taught sign language as used by deaf people. They can learn 700 words. They can communicate with each other and with their teacher. Some of them like to paint. Orangutans, I know many who do paintings when they're in captivity. And then I carry Rats turn out to be amazingly intelligent. And if you don't believe me, Google 5 smart rats. Ignore the postings that say how to kill smart rats. Ignore that. Just Google 5 smart rats. But he represents the giant forest rat of Africa. And they have been trained to detect the smell of landmines buried deep under the ground, left over from some of Africa's long civil wars. And I've met so many people who've lost their feet or their legs from treading on a landmine, usually women and children, working in the fields. And these guys have also been taught, some of them can sniff out ivory, some of them can sniff out rhino horn, some of them can sniff out pangolin. I don't know if you even know about pangolins. They're the most heavily trafficked wild animal on the planet. And you have pangolins here in your forest. They're little scaly anteaters. They're the most charming, loving, lovable creatures. And they're being made extinct because people in China and other countries believe there's a medicinal value in the scales, just as they believe that's true for rhino horn and tiger bones and bear bile, and so on and so on. So we know these guys are very intelligent. Pigs are as intelligent as dogs, more intelligent than some. And again, if you don't believe me, Google not Picasso the artist, but Picasso. You will see something so amazing. Picasso is a pig rescued from slaughter, and she lives on a tiny sanctuary in South Africa, in Cape Town actually. And her rescuer is an artist, and she noticed this pig was fascinated by her painting. So she set up an easel, and this pig, just watch her joy. As she holds the paintbrush, she dips it in different colors, and she makes these wonderful paintings, which are selling for $5,000. So Picasso is an absolute delight, and you will love this little video. Choose the geographic one, it's the best. So these animals, as I say, are way more intelligent. But think what we've done. Think of all the IT now. Think of artificial intelligence. Just imagine, I think it's going to come up to full moon soon. And if you have a clear sky, please, when you see a large moon up there, just try and reclaim that feeling of absolute amazement that I had when I watched the landing on the moon. We put people walking up there for goodness sake. So our intellect is extraordinary. So how come we are destroying our only home? We've even sent a rocket up to Mars. At one time people thought Mars might support human life. But from this rocket, a little robot has been crawling around all over the surface of Mars. We don't want to go and live there. We've got this one planet, and we are destroying it. We're still destroying it. So, not surprising, is it, that as I was traveling around the world, I was meeting many young people, particularly university students, some high school students, who just didn't seem to have much hope. Mostly they were just apathetic, they didn't seem to care. Sometimes they were really depressed. Sometimes they were angry, even violent. And when I began asking them, why do you feel this way? They said, well, you've compromised our future. There's nothing we can do about it. There's a saying, we haven't inherited this planet from our parents, we borrowed it from our children. That is not true. We have been stealing the future of our young people, as many of you here. And on behalf of my generation, the one before, and the current older people, I apologize. We have been stealing your future. But then I thought, is it true that nothing can be done? There are scientists who say we've reached a tipping point, that whatever we do, we can't really make any difference. I don't believe that, and luckily other scientists agree with me. There's a window of time, but I don't think it's big. And if we get together with this window, this precious window of time that we have, we can start healing some of the harm we've inflicted and at least slowing down climate change. So that's what led to my starting our program for young people, Roots and Shoots. It began, like so much else, in Tanzania, with 12 high school students. They were concerned about different things. They came to see me from 8 schools. Some worried about the poaching in the national parks. Some worried about the illegal dynamite fishing that was destroying the coral reefs. Some of them worried about street children with no homes. Some of them were worried about the bad treatment of stray dogs and cats. They had all these different concerns. And so I told them to get their friends together. We had a big meeting, and Roots and Shoots was born. Why Roots and Shoots? Well, I was in that forest this morning. I met a tree about 1,000 years old, many big, huge, beautiful trees. And when they began to grow, they would have been growing from quite small seeds. And as it began to grow, you could have picked it up, and little white roots and little shoot, and it would have seemed so insignificant. But there is a magic, a life force so strong in those little seeds. The little roots to reach the water can work through rocks and eventually push them aside. And the little shoot to reach the sunlight can work through cracks in the brick wall and eventually knock it down. And so Roots and Shoots is about hope. Hundreds and thousands of young people around the world can work through the rocks and the walls, which is all the harm, social and environmental, that we've inflicted on the planet. From the start, we decided that each group of Roots and Shoots would choose 3 projects because everything's interconnected. One project to help people, one project to help animals, one project to help the environment, or one big project that helped all 3. And today there are Roots and Shoots groups in about 60 countries. We have members in kindergarten, even younger, and university and everything in between. University very strong and really helping us to spread Roots and Shoots through volunteerism. And about 10 years ago, a film was made called Jane's Journey, and there's a little section in it about Roots and Shoots. So when you look at this little video that I brought, where it's dark green on the map, that's where there were most Roots and Shoots. There's more dark green now. Where it's white, there were no Roots and Shoots, and there's less white now. So let's look at this little video, and you get some idea of the variation, because young people choose their projects. We don't dictate from the top. They choose to do projects about which they're passionate. So I'm happy to say that Roots and Shoots, thanks to TP Lim, who's sitting down here somewhere, and Peter Ong, can't see any of my friends at the moment, but anyhow, it's going fast. I think we recruited a wonderful potential leader just this afternoon. Gabe is also somewhere down here in the front, a very dynamic young man, 11 years, but I think he's going to be a leader. Anybody can start Roots and Shoots. That's what I want to say. And I know there's information out there that you can pick up, or you can look up rootsandshoots.org, which is the international website. It just needs young people coming together, sometimes with a mentor if they're very young, choosing projects to make the world a better place. Because one of the reasons why people feel hopeless and helpless is they look at the big picture, and it's daunting. It's daunting. So when you hear think globally, act locally, no, act locally. See the difference you can make. See how you can clean up a stream. See how you can remove plastic. The village where I visited today, the indigenous people, they learned about rubbish. Their village was clean. And that was a Roots and Shoots project for one of our Roots and Shoots volunteers who went and lived with them for 2 months. And so anybody can start it. And the main message of Roots and Shoots is every single one of us makes some impact every single day. And we can choose what sort of impact we're going to make. Unless you're really poor, and then you have no choice. You have to cut the last tree to grow food, fish the last fish to feed your family, eat the most cheap junk food in order to survive. You can't say, did it harm the environment? Was it cruel to animals? So I'm hoping that after this visit, that Roots and Shoots will start growing in Penang, because it's needed here. So you can see why the young people are my greatest reason for hope. Everywhere I go, there are young people with shining eyes wanting to tell Dr. Jane what they're doing or what they plan to do to make this a better world. And they're rolling up their sleeves and getting out there and taking action. It's all about action. Yes, well, my next reason for hope is this brain. We haven't always used it wisely, but we're now coming up with new innovative technology that will enable us to live in greater harmony with the planet, the clean, green energy, solar, wind, tide, and so forth. And many other innovative technologies, some of which I really don't understand. They're way above my head, but gosh, amazing things are happening. But just as important is using our brain to pay attention to our own ecological footprints each and every day. That's what's going to do it. That with advanced technology. Next reason about the resilience of nature. Give nature a chance and it will come back. I mean, there may be oil palm plantations that are quite new, that are not in a good place because it's destroyed the original old growth forest. That's so important with its biodiversity. But if the people who are growing it can be given alternative ways of making a living, that plantation can once again be restored to the original forest. If you fly over Gombe today, remember I told you it was an island forest surrounded by completely bare hills. There aren't any bare hills anymore. The trees have come back. And I'm sure all of you have seen a place that was destroyed. Give nature a chance and she will reclaim it. Animals on the brink of extinction can be given another chance. And that's really lucky for you Malaysians because you have so many animals on the brink of extinction. There's many of the primates, the hornbills, all the other extraordinary animals that are your children's heritage are at risk of extinction, but it's not too late. If people care enough, this trend can be reversed. And finally, there's what I call the indomitable human spirit. People who tackle what seems to be impossible and won't give up. I talked about apartheid in South Africa when I first went to Africa, thanks to Nelson Mandela, with the help of de Klerk. South Africa was lifted out of the evil regime of apartheid. And there are other heroes out there, other icons, but you know, you meet people. I've met so many people who say are immigrants, and they come with nothing to a country. They've lost their family, maybe they're wounded, and yet somehow they make a life for themselves and they still can smile at you. And there are people with tremendous disabilities who lead lives that are really, really inspirational to those around them. And this little boy I mentioned, 11-year-old Gabe, is one such inspirational person. So it's not only human beings who can be inspirational. And we have time for a few questions now, but after the questions, I'm going to show you how animals also have the same indomitable spirit. So, if we can have the questions now. That's the end of the talk, by the way.